super excited to talk about this stuff with you guys today. We're going to be talking about how the best companies reward and recognize staff to increase employee engagement and lower voluntary turnover. Like we've already been doing, we want this to be a really interactive session. So please, like we're doing, blow up that chat box. If you have questions, feel free to put it in the question box as well. We'll have a Q&A at the end. We're really excited to chat with you guys, and let's get started. So before we begin, I should probably introduce ourselves. With me here today is Jason Lindstrom. Jason is a passionate entrepreneur. Over the past 18 years, Jason has built 3 high-growth tech companies, always with a focus on attracting and retaining the best talent. He's a CEO of Bucket List Rewards, an employee rewards and recognition platform. He's also been a guest lecturer at Simon Fraser University and also the University of British Columbia, speaking on a variety of topics, including building high-performance corporate culture and entrepreneurship. And fun fact for you guys, Jason can actually walk on his hands.
And
well.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you for the fun fact. I can, in fact, walk on my hands. I will not be doing that here today, but I will be sharing, hopefully, a ton of great information. And if I may, Jared, I'd love to introduce you as well. Jared, of course, is our host. He's a former professional athlete. He is the culture evangelist over here at Bucket List Rewards. And he's previously worked with organizations all over Canada, doing some really cool things with employee engagement and inclusivity. He was a founder of the first ever professional volleyball association in the country. And additionally, he headed up a number of employee inclusivity and engagement programs over at Mount Royal University. So today we're going to be your guides. We're going to be going through a bunch of content. Just as a quick short preamble for myself. Oh, I saw somebody say, Stephanie Felder, do it, walk on your hands. Jaron, look what you did, bud. It will be a fun session, no hand walking, maybe as a takeaway from today's session. Just as a continued short preamble to myself, and then we'll get into the heart of this whole thing. So Bucket List Rewards is an enterprise rewards and recognition platform. I've been really fortunate. I've had a chance to work with organizations, everything from startups to Fortune 500 companies, and we've worked with organizations in over 40 different countries. I've personally had experience in healthcare with organizations like Stanford Health, multinational tech corporations like Corel, higher education like University of Texas. And the reason I mention those is we're going to be sharing ideas and best practices from those types of organizations in today's session. Cool, so I'm going to keep trucking right along here. I've attended a bunch of webinars myself. I've been in your shoes, and what I love is when I can walk away from a session with some actionable takeaways. And so that's my goal for you today. I'd love for everybody who's attending to have at least 1 to 3 great ideas that you can implement in your business today. And so we've stockpiled this session with some really good statistics, some really good tools and templates, and hopefully a bunch of best practices. Awesome. In terms of an agenda, we're going to be talking about the ROI of an effective recognition program. We're going to be talking about how to motivate high performance, how to take your great team and make them even better. We're going to talk about a bunch of best practices from industry leaders, and we'll also be talking about how to implement recognition programs. And that brings us to the first quick poll question today. And I'm going to launch this in a moment. I'd love to get your input and feedback. I'm going to give you a second here. So the question is, what are you most interested in learning about today? I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. So you should see that up on your screen. What are you most interested in learning about today? If you want to go ahead and give that a quick vote. And what I'm going to do with the results is I'm going to use that to kind of weight how much time I spend on each different topic. The good news is there's a nice balance between these topics. I'll give this another 2 or 3 more seconds before wrapping it up. I love it. This is great. Okay, I'm going to click end poll. Good participation, by the way, everybody. Hundreds and hundreds of votes are floating in. Awesome. So, wonderful team. I am going to be up top spending just a little bit of time on the ROI of effective recognition programs. I'll spend a lot of time sharing best practices, motivating high performance, and of course, ideas from other companies. but I'm going to go ahead and hit stop sharing, and we'll just keep trucking along here. Okay, so I'd like to start off with a short quote from Sir Richard Branson. And as you can see up on screen, if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your business. I was fortunate enough to go down to Sir Richard Branson's private island called Necker Island with about 20 other entrepreneurs to share kind of best practices around culture building and engagement. And what I was most impressed with was that Richard treated his guests, us, just as well as he treated his staff. He knew all the staff by first name, and he got to know all our names, and he's incredibly gracious. In summary, he really walked the talk. And I guess this is my first takeaway for you. When your leadership participates in a recognition program, it's just going to be way more successful. And so when you're planning your program, you want to invite them in early, you want to get their guidance, input, and ideas. Next up, this is a bit of a pop quiz for the attendees. We're just going to do a quick level set. I suspect many of you already know the value of recognition, but I'm just going to do a quick double check here. So I'm going to ask you the question: what percent of Americans leave their jobs because they do not feel appreciated? If you just want to go ahead and punch that into the chat window, and Jaron will read a few of those answers off.
Yeah, we got lots of 30%, 40%, and then the other way too, 70, 80%. So everyone's seems pretty close. Yeah, hundreds of answers. I love it. Look at this.
Good
Lots
for
of 80%.
everybody.
Yeah.
So, Jaron, if you were to guess, what would you say, my man?
You know what? I'm going to go with the average. Let's say 50.
50, great guess. It turns out around 64% of people are willing to leave their jobs due to lack of recognition. And the reason that's so important, and I'll get into this more later, a lot of times when it comes to rolling out a program, you need to create clear goals for it, and you need to get management on side, and letting them know key statistics like this will make your program far more likely to be given the green light. So we all know the importance of recognition. I'm going to take that knowledge a little bit deeper, and this is going to be kind of a fun one as well. So the question is, are leaders doing a good job with recognition? And this is a really interesting one. So there's a large survey done across multiple companies asking leaders this question. And if you ask leaders, are they doing a good job with recognition? Nearly 80% of senior leaders believe employees are recognized at least on a monthly basis, with a good chunk thinking that employees are recognized even weekly. Now, if we're to ask the same question to employees, are you recognized? Anybody want to punch an answer into the chat window there? What percentage of employees report they're recognized? Yeah, so I'm looking at the chat window now. Look at smart audience, very good. The answer, only 30% of employees report they are recognized annually or not at all. Meaning of the 30%, a much smaller percent would report that they're recognized monthly or weekly. So in summary, there's just a huge disconnect between what senior leaders think is happening and what's really happening inside of an organization. I'm going to be sharing a bunch of best practices and tips on how to alleviate this problem. Okay, so we kind of talked about some of the downsides to recognition. I'm a huge optimist, and I'm going to get right into some of the upside, like how can this help performance? How can this help you build a great corporate culture? And to do that, I'm going to start off with a couple of ideas from Google. What's super interesting about Google is they do some amazing stuff when it comes to taking care of their employees. But if you're to ask Laszlo Bock, the former head of Google, how they became one of the best workplaces, what he says is it's not about the foosball tables. It's not about the really cool campus. They do have a super cool campus, by the way. I had a chance to visit it. They have these little bikes you can wheel around. They have outdoor volleyball beach courts. It's amazing, but it's not all that cool stuff. It's in fact, in his words, we take excellent care of our people, and employee recognition is the most effective tool to keep people engaged and make them feel valuable. So this is clearly near and dear to their hearts. And if I was to break down their program just a little bit more, so Google has a very robust recognition and rewards program. For example, they do peer-to-peer recognition where employees can recognize one another for living the company values. They have performance bonuses, management spot bonuses, and they do much bigger rewards as well. For example, historically, they had done something called the Founders Awards. This is no longer run today. They've pivoted the program. but they used to do something called the Founders Rewards. And so innovation is near and dear to Google's heart. And the Founders Rewards were all about awarding innovation. And a couple of the innovations that came out of the Founders Awards were things like Gmail and something called Google AdSense. And anyone want to take a guess as to how much revenue Google AdSense generated for Google last year? Go ahead and punch. You see 30 billion, billions, one before it. It was $146 billion. That's a lot of billions. And so what's the big takeaway here? You get what you reward. So they care about innovation. They do a ton of things to build an innovative culture, but of course they have a rewards and recognition program to reward innovation. And so you get amazingly impactful programs that drive revenue, that drive profitability, that make for a really happy team and make for a really happy company. Awesome. So one more kind of fun tidbit about Google. They at first, Google being Google, they're very good at A/B testing, trying out different results. What do you think staff preferred? For the Founders Awards, they tried out originally offering a large cash prize and a trip to Hawaii. And feel free again, just to punch these into the, oh, you guys are so smart. Look at this. I'm guessing it's like 80% of the audience here are saying the trip to Hawaii. Jaron, what would you guess, bud?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the rest of the crew here with Hawaii.
Yeah, in the creation of the slide deck, that tropical picture kind of gives it away. It is in fact the trip to Hawaii. So this is super interesting, and this is another good takeaway for everybody here. So they did this side-by-side test. They actually gave out a pretty substantial cash prize. But what they found out with a cash prize is it's too closely associated with compensation. And for those who got it, it was kind of okay, but it created a lot of resentment for those who did not get it. Whereas a trip to Hawaii was kind of personalized, massively impactful, and at the end of the day, it just resulted in a lot more happy employees. So experiences, by the way, are massively impactful when they're well done. Wonderful. So that's a quick preamble. I'm going to spend just a few moments going over how to calculate the ROI of recognition, and we've got some really cool tools and templates for everybody to make use of. I've also seen a bunch of questions in the chat window around people asking, is this deck going to be made available? Yes, we're going to hand out this deck to everybody who attends today. Additionally, we're going to record today's session. So let's get into the ROI and talk a little bit more about these tools and templates. Last quick stats. I've already shared the importance of recognition, but if we're to go again just a little bit deeper, according to Harvard Business Review, when you have a culture of recognition, staff are 5 times more likely to feel valued, 7 times more likely to stay with the company, and 11 times more likely to feel completely committed to their jobs. And what's really cool is if you look at all the top performing companies in the world, from my experience, they have recognition programs in place. Whether that's Google, which I spoke about, whether it's Disney, even inside the military and some of the more elite organizations, they all have recognition programs. So next up, I want to talk a little bit more about ROI. I've been doing a lot of sessions, and what we've been hearing from HR professionals is that they want a more clear way to articulate what is the ROI of recognition. And so what we've done is we've created a spreadsheet. And in a few moments, if you're interested, we'll see if you want a copy of this. It's just free to use. It's up to you. The gist of it is you can enter in how many employees you have, what the annual salary is, and it'll automatically spit out the ROI of the program. So and a really important takeaway here is when you go to get a program approved, especially in HR, what management wants to see is they want to see an output that's greater than the input. And this will more clearly identify what the nice output it is in relation to input. So give me a second. I'm just gonna, out of curiosity, I'm going to pop up a quick poll question here. So this is a newer tool for us, and I'm always curious who would like a copy of it. I'm just gonna launch the poll here. So would you like a copy of the ROI spreadsheet? Jaron, I think that's a unanimous yes.
Yeah, I got some cap locks. We definitely needed it, I think.
Very good. Okay, cool. So it looks like, holy smokes, 600 of you, well, sorry, 560 as of the moment of this poll want to copy this. Cool. We will 100% send out a link to this for you to peruse. If you have feedback or questions, like I said, we're here to help. Please feel free to ask questions to either me or Jaren when you get a copy of this. I'm going to go ahead and hit end poll, and we've officially made note if you requested a copy of that. To kind of keep moving along, I'm going to talk just a few more moments about getting management buy-in. So how do you get management buy-in, and why is this important? First, I've worked with a bunch of organizations that have had the best intentions, that they weren't quite able to launch the recognition program when they wanted to. I've shared a couple of reasons so far, but I'll share one more insight. Normally the senior management team, they have kind of their top 1 to 3 initiatives. And unless your program makes that 1 to 3 list, it's not going to get approved and move forward. So here's a few strategies to get management buy-in, and more importantly, get them excited and to get them to participate in the program. So top of the list, you want to survey your employees. You want to find out how your company's doing with recognition. You know, for some of you, you might be doing a great job with recognition today. Awesome. You might have a great program. Staff are highly satisfied. Amazing. A big chunk of you, as you saw earlier, a lot of your staff, there's a good chance you might feel underappreciated, or maybe they're not recognized in the right channel. And in a few moments, I'm going to be sharing a really cool survey tool if you want to leverage that as well. Once you survey your staff, share the results back with the managers, leaders. The stats are really important, but even more important, you want to share testimonials, and I'll give you an example of that in a second. And then lastly, I already spoke about the importance of ROI, and we will provide you with that little calculator. So let's dig deeper into this employee testimonials. So we have a survey that, if you like, it can capture this sort of feedback. It'll let you know where you're winning with recognition and where you can improve. These are some real results from real employees from a tech company we did some work with. So when we survey the employees, there's a in general, the employees felt deeply unappreciated. And this company actually had a mediumly too high of a turnover. And some of the things we've heard from staff was, when I first joined the company, it's redacted, sorry, I want to protect this company's privacy. When I first joined the company, I could tell leaders cared, but in the past year, I feel lonely and ignored. What happened to the company I love? What was super interesting is that when the HR leader presented this to management, they shared all the stats. Management was like, fine. They shared these quotes, and immediately they got the green light for the program. In my experience, most good companies, most good leaders deeply care about the team. And if they know they've missed the mark, if they know their team feels unappreciated, they're going to make a move to correct that right away. Cool. So how do you survey your staff? Just so you know, there's a ton of survey tools out there. You can do this informally. There's all sorts of ways to do this. Once again, we've actually had a fairly large volume of requests for this type of tool. And so we've actually created what we call an enterprise employee recognition survey. It's awesome. It'll let you know whether you're doing a good job with recognition. It'll let you know how staff might want to be rewarded. It'll give you a bunch of actionable feedback you can implement into your organization. It's something else we're going to do. I'm happy to share these questions with everybody as an email takeaway. Something we recently started doing here is we've been doing these recognition surveys and benchmarks. And so what does that mean? Well, if you're interested, we could run the survey and share the findings back with you. It's all confidential. Not only do we run the recognition survey for you, but we'll share an awesome report. Over on the left-hand side, there's kind of a screenshot of what it looks like. We'll let you know how you stack up against other similar sized companies inside your industry. We'll share some best practices from, again, inside your industry, and it's delivered, as I said, in this actionable report. I'm going to pop up a survey. We typically give around 10 per month. And so we've saved them all up for this session. So I'm going to pop up a survey. Polling. So you want a recognition survey? It's a simple yes or no. I'm just going to go ahead and launch that question. So if you want some assistance with this, feel free to let us know. I'll let this run for just a few moments. And like I said, I'm happy to share the poll questions with you. Wonderful. Oh, I saw somebody say, I feel you pull a lot of information from us from these polls, but we don't get a lot. So thanks for sharing that. In this case, we do run the survey, but more importantly, we share roughly 50% of this report is dedicated to actionable recommendations. So sort of saying like, hey, maybe you scored a 5 or a 7 out of 10. Here's things you can do to become a 9 out of 10 with recognition. So it's all about providing deep value. There's no strings attached. Again, if we can do a good job, help you guys build a great culture, we know that'll pay off tenfold down the road. Great. I'm going to wrap it up here. And I'm going to keep moving right along. So next up, we're going to share some best practices. I think you'll have some good takeaways moving forward from here. So when it comes to rolling out a recognition program, there's kind of 4 key components. First, there's the planning. This is where you get really clear on your goals and objectives. Then there's the communication side of things. And in summary, how does your team want to be communicated with? How do they want to be recognized? Next up, you pick the functionality, like what are the key pillars of your program? And then lastly, you want to measure your program. So I'll get into the planning side of things a little bit. So again, we met with hundreds of companies and we kind of collected a variety of results. Goals vary by industry and size of company, but I'll share some of the common goals that you might want to keep in mind when building your program. So some of the goals we commonly see include increasing employee engagement, breaking down company silos. A good recognition program will do an amazing job, especially if you have like multiple locations or staff in different locations, or sometimes it's just a matter of like some of the staff are in office and some are on a manufacturing floor. But a good recognition program really does break down company silos. Recognition programs can do an awesome job of increasing the feeling of recognition. No surprises there. Some really cool things a recognition program can do is it can increase customer satisfaction, increase innovation like we saw with Google, and of course, lower voluntary turnover. Some other things you're going to want to keep in mind is you're going to want to have a clear understanding of who your employee audience is. So who's going to participate or maybe not participate. You want to understand how they want to be recognized and rewarded. And it's really important to understand their communication preferences. So do they prefer face-to-face recognition? Do they want to be recognized on email, instant messaging? If you know how they want to be recognized and the format, your programs can have way better utilization and participation. And then lastly, you choose your tactics or pillars, and I'll go through peer-to-peer and performance rewards in a second. Next up, we're going to talk about communication. This is kind of a fun topic. So when you roll out your program, you're going to want to be really strategic about which channels to choose. So what I found is that these days, people don't want to log into one more platform. They want to be recognized and recognized on their favorite tools. So depending upon what industry you're in, you can choose your tools. So why don't I give you a very precise use case? So let's say you're a knowledge-based company. In our world, when we say knowledge-based workers, that simply means people in front of a computer. So it could be a tech company, it could be a professional services organization like lawyers or accountants, it could be a municipality. And when it comes to communication, I suspect many of you have things that like virtual meetings or face-to-face meetings. You might have access to instant messaging or mobile, digital displays, email recognition, internet. There's all these different tools available to you. But when you craft your plan, what you really want to think about is what does my employee want? And so in this example, let's say it's a tech employee. Let's say these days, with COVID, they're working mostly remote from home and coffee shops. Let's say they do participate, but it's all like virtual meetings, instant messaging. And why don't I show you how this comes alive? A recognition program could come alive for a person like this. And I'm going to be sharing real world examples from some really good organizations. So I'm going to start off with this idea of a daily huddle. So in this case, up on screen, this is a company called O2E. They have hundreds of employees all over North America in a variety of different offices and location around multiple countries. They do the daily huddle is done via Zoom. They start every single day with a huddle. They kick it off. It's roughly 10 minutes long. They start off with good news. They recognize staff for key contributions on a daily basis. And they also share how the company's doing against its KPIs. So what does this do? It creates a sense of inclusivity. They do a great job recognizing good work. The recognizing, or pardon me, the sharing of company KPIs, I think is really important. I've sat in on one of these sessions, and what's really cool is when people can see how the company's performing, it creates a lot of transparency and authenticity. So daily huddles can be a powerful way to very quickly and easily begin recognizing your staff. I'm going to talk a little bit more about using instant messaging. So for example, I'm sure many of you use things like Slack or MS Teams. What you can do today inside those programs is you can set up things like a recognition channel. There's no cost to it. You can do it completely free. You can see in this example in Slack, there's a little recognition channel. Then you invite team members to come in and you invite them to begin recognizing one another for what I'd recommend is for living your organizational core values or behaviors that are really important to you. Why is this important? We've worked with organizations a ton in the tech space, but one thing we've found is that if you use a tool that they love, for example, there's one company called Advisor Websites. They launched their recognition program inside of Slack, and they have a 90% of staff participating on a monthly basis. And by that, I mean they are recognizing a colleague or receiving a recognition. And then also in this case, there's no monetary reward attached to it. It's all just kind of done through their favorite instant messaging tools. Additionally, they also, they do a weekly all hands meeting. They skim through their activity feed and they pick out some of the top recognitions, which the CEO then talks about as examples of great performance. Just sidebar, I'm kind of keeping a half an eyeball in the chat window there. As Jared mentioned up front, there's tons of questions coming in, and we're going to be addressing those at the end. Next up, I'll talk about mobile recognition. So again, how to do it. For some employees, like maybe you're in healthcare, maybe it's retail, it's really important to recognize people where they want to be recognized. And in this example, well, we worked with an organization called Peter Pizza. They got about 2,000 staff, 50 locations. With their program, managers can handle spot awards around things like customer satisfaction and also just creating a great corporate culture. And so there's just a few ideas that you can leverage to begin building a good recognition program. One last comment, we have this whole idea of a brag board. This is simply what we've seen done historically is staff can nominate one another, management can pick some winners, and then you can share that on your intranet and really begin to showcase what great work is inside your organization. And why is that important? Well, you get what you reward. Awesome. So next up, we're going to touch on functionality and then measurement. So functionality is really the fun piece where you get to choose what program makes the most sense for you. Again, what I've seen is like not only should you choose what program makes sense for you, but how you want it to work. Hands down, one of the best types of recognition is peer-to-peer. Why is it important? It allows everybody to participate, and participation often results in a really successful program. Number two, your management can't always be out in the field seeing all the great work that takes place. A lot of times your staff will be out there, and if they can recognize one another for the good work that's happening, you're going to be able to identify more of the great behaviors that you want to see. Also with peer-to-peer, it does a great job of breaking down silos because you're not relying on just a handful of people to recognize good work. Another cool takeaway with peer-to-peer recognition, it can have a huge impact to employee engagement. In summary, when people are being recognized for living the company core values, they're going to feel far more connected to the mission, vision, and values of your organization. And so this is a really powerful program that you could consider implementing in your organization. I'd also like to take a few moments to talk a little bit about performance rewards. Performance rewards is, again, kind of rewarding the behaviors you want to see more of, similar to what we saw with Google, rewarding innovation. Whatever your industry is, you can recognize those behaviors that you want to see more of. So, for example, if you're in the technology space, maybe you want to be recognizing things like customer satisfaction. And why is that important? Well, when your customers love you, they're more likely to give you a referral, and they're also less likely to churn, for example. In financial services, maybe you want to be incentivizing things like sales. Maybe you want to get more granular. Maybe you want to be incentivizing things like loans officer of the year. Over in manufacturing, safety can be a massively powerful way to have a much better safety record. if you're recognizing positive acts or good, safe behaviors, you'll then begin modeling to the rest of your team what you want to see more of. And then lastly, things like patient care awards for healthcare. So you can just keep going with this as a theme. Maybe you're in municipalities or cities or whatever it is, you can recognize, again, the behaviors you want to see more of. And when it's celebrated publicly, say at a Zoom meeting or in a face-to-face meeting, you're going to see a lot more of that behavior. I love to share just a short story and kind of bring all the pieces together, speak a bit about peer-to-peer, talk a little bit about performance rewards. There's an organization called Home Instead. What's kind of neat about them is they have a large number of staff out in the field in care homes and a bunch of staff in offices as well. At Home Instead, what they do is they really reward what matters. And what does that look like? Well, they recognize things, or they have a peer recognition program, which they name PeerCeive. They recognize things like the last minute shift pickup award, because they want people to be incentivized to pick up shifts at the last moment. They have their own version of a patient care award. And they, of course, recognize things like safety, because safety is not just important to manufacturing. What's really cool about this, I've been talking a lot about how you can lower voluntary turnover. At Home Instead, they reduced employee turnover by 40% in some of their care homes, which is massive. At the end of the day, every CEO in most companies hates to lose an A player. And if you can reduce that in your own organization, I suspect you'll be awfully happy. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about measurement. And in summary, how is a program performing? And then the good news is we're going to get to Q&A, so less of me talking, more of you talking, or more of your questions that we'll be able to run through. So to be clear, there are 101 ways to measure a recognition program. I'm going to share very tops of the waves, just a few key things you might want to consider. So you want to be measuring things like engagement. So how many employees are participating each month? You want to be keeping a close eye on management participation. So which managers are recognizing and which aren't. From my experience in referencing the Richard Branson example, when leaders participate in the program, what I've universally seen is participation goes way up. What matters to management and leadership often matters a lot to the staff. So you want to keep track of who's participating and who's not. And also it's really useful if you choose to give out rewards, and you don't have to, but if you choose to give out rewards, who's being recognized and also who's not being recognized. A lot of times you might have an A player in your organization. If they haven't been told thank you or recognized recently, that's not a good thing. So you want to keep an eye on that. So in summary, what did we talk about today? We shared a bunch of key industry stats. We talked about the ROI of an effective program. We talked about the importance of personalized rewards, how to get management buy-in, how to survey your staff, and also a bunch of best practices of rewards and recognition. But I think we're going to be able to get to open Q&A here in just 1 second. And Jaron, how did we do? Did we get a bunch of questions?
Yeah, we're doing great. You got lots of questions in there. It seems like everybody's pretty engaged and has some great questions that we're excited to ask you after you're done there, Jason.
Awesome. Yeah, I do have one quick question. Again, my primary goal today is to deliver as much value as possible. If we're not able to get through a lot of these questions, Jaron and I can take these away and we'll email you back responses. But as a representative of Bucket List Rewards, if you're interested, I'm going to throw one last question up, which is if you want a demo of our platform, we'd be happy to show you how it works. You don't have to request this. I'm going to put the survey up. If you want to, you can feel free to ignore the poll question. Or if you want to learn more about what we're all about, one of the team members would be happy to show you how this works. Give me a second here. So I'm just going to launch this poll. Want to see a demo of Bucket List Rewards? The good thing is we do excellent work. We are recognized, ranked #1 for employee rewards and recognition based on customer satisfaction and ease of use. People do feel like people do seem to love our platform, and I'm sure you will as well. But again, there's no commitment here. Feel free to ignore the question if you don't want to participate. I'll give that another 2 or 3 seconds, and then we'll get into the Q&A, which I'm really excited about. Great. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Wonderful. All right, my man, Jaron, why
Yeah,
don't we
no,
get into Q&A?
for sure. Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason, for chatting with that. Okay, so we had some really, if you want to speak about a little bit more about that management buy-in, there was quite a few questions that came in of, I mean, a lot of times employees are really wanting that recognition, but how do you really in place that culture through management?
There might be two questions there. Um, so one thing I found is if you want good management participation, if that's truly what the question is, if it's around like
Mhm.
how do we get good management participation, there's like 3 or 4 ideas I can share with you. One, you want to get them involved early in the planning side of things, because if management can participate, they're going to far more likely have a sense of ownership over the program. Number two, training. Prior to launching the program, you're gonna want to invite managers in, and you're gonna want them to start handing out sample recognition. You're gonna also want to communicate the value and impact of a program like this. And for example, maybe you surveyed your staff, share some of those pieces of feedback. Like let all management know that if you're not doing a good job with recognition, this is a problem that needs to be solved. And during that recognition training, have them hand out again some sample recognitions, get them to do the act. Because once people do something, they're far more likely to do it again. I'd also recommend having some sort of kickoff event where you can have leadership, whether it's middle management or senior leadership, begin recognizing staff for great work. What does that do? You'll create alignment in the program. You'll create education and awareness before you launch it. And then when you kick it off, you get them in front of the team to begin recognizing that great performance. So everybody's bought in, aligned, and there's also a ton of excitement around the program. But those are kind of the key 3 or 4 things I'd recommend to help with the management buy-in piece.
Oh, thanks, Jason. That's great. On the other side of the coin, we had a great question from Megan, and also quite a few people asked it. But how do you keep your peer recognition from being a popularity contest, and ensure encouraging teams just to give it back and forth?
Well, it's funny with peer recognition. There's maybe a few ways to answer that question. So again, when you're launching your program, how you educate your staff on how the program's supposed to be used will have a really big impact on how they in fact use it. Also, how the things that managers are recognizing employees for, your staff will also often model. Um, if in terms of the popularity contest piece, that sometimes will happen inside of a recognition program. Sometimes people are just more visible than others. Like you might have a developer who's in an incredibly small team, and then you might have a sales guy or a sales leader who, on a weekly basis gets up in front of the team. What you want to do is, in my experience, again, is you want to educate the team before launching it. And also you want to make the program super easy to access, and ideally send out automated prompts or some sort of reminders to encourage all staff to participate so that nobody gets left out or ignored.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Jason. Another question that came in quite a bit is interested in how you see employee recognition in the time of a pandemic and with so many employees working from home and remotely,
Yeah,
and then also blended.
yeah. Excellent question. So employee recognition is just an awesome tool to help staff feel connected. What we've noticed across the board, we have a bunch of analytics we've been observing, is that employee recognition has gone way up in this remote environment. Why is that? Recognition is in fact a good way to stay connected, because you can't have those random bump-ins in front of the water cooler anymore. You can't really go out for coffee with one another. But if you have a good recognition program, it is a good way for staff inside of teams and amongst teams to be appreciating and recognizing one another. So I think now more than ever, it's super important. And then in terms of like, how do you bring a program like this alive? I shared a bunch of ideas earlier today, but like plugging it into your remote tools, like whether it's instant messaging or email or digital postcards, and then weaving it into your meetings as well, like really bring it alive so that people can visibly see it on a regular basis.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many different ways that communication techniques are being used right now. So having that consistent message, super important. Yeah. Interesting question here. In your opinion, Jason, how would you differentiate employee satisfaction to employee engagement?
So that's a great question. I guess from my perspective, is like how you would evaluate those things would be done just slightly differently. So with employee satisfaction, you might ask a slightly different skill set than employee engagement. Certainly, there's going to be a ton of overlap between the two. For clarity, I am not a survey expert. That's not what I'd call necessarily in my wheelhouse. We do a ton of surveys, mostly around rewards and recognition. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful.
Awesome. Great one here actually is there a general guideline for a good target amount for employee recognition program? You know, a revenue number or a percentage of salary?
Yeah, so great question. I've heard stats, broad stats thrown around that 1% of salary should be set aside for employee rewards and recognition. There's a bunch of ways to think about this though. We've worked with nonprofits with very little budget who implemented recognition programs and had huge success. And then we've worked with some incredibly well-funded venture companies. And those programs are, of course, very successful as well with some insanely good rewards. You know, of note or interest, if you want to see it, have something handy here. I'm just going to throw this up on screen. Just as a general rule, when it comes to designing your recognition program, you want to pick a budget that works for you. And here's just some broad numbers that you might want to keep in mind that we've seen. These are not firm rules. These are like what I would call guardrails. So for example, with peer-to-peer, manager-to-peer, you can roll a program out with zero budget, to be super clear, like advisor websites did, and they have 90% participation. But what we often see is companies will kind of set aside $10 to $20 per employee per month. For years of service, a couple common benchmarks we see are kind of between $50 to $100 per year of service. And then manager spot rewards really depends upon the impact of the reward, you know, anywhere from 50 to well over 500. Yeah, so these are just some, again, loose guardrails, but feel free to define whatever is most, feel free to set your own guidelines so that you can roll out a recognition program in your own company.
Question from Amy as well. Does Bucket List offer recognition training for managers?
We do, absolutely. Yeah, it's part of our kind of standard implementation, and I think we both have a super fun time with it, and we do an awesome job with it as well.
That's awesome. And kind of going along that same theme, great question here from Monica is how do you prevent recognition rewards becoming an expectation and almost demotivating?
Yes, I love it. So a bunch of ways. Number one, if you don't have a monetary reward attached to it, it's just purely recognition. And one thing I've been trying to emphasize is recognition on its own is incredibly impactful. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs down at the bottom, everybody wants to be appreciated and loved. That's foundational to human nature. So you can roll out a recognition program without rewards. It is better. You will have a higher utilization rate, higher participation rate with awards. But sorry, to get to the specific question, how do you stop it from just being taken for granted? You can just cap budgets. You can cap rewards. You can also do one thing we've seen and done is you can kind of like you don't have to make the monetization really clear. For example, you can allow people to recognize one another and attach points, for example, but maybe just hide those points. And maybe the points don't have a clear monetary value associated with them, almost like a Visa card points. Those are some quick tips to stop people from taking a program for advantage.
Well, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I love this question. So some best practices around, we talked about having to work from home, and people in the office, but also there's, service technicians that are people that are independently working on the field. How do you get that all consistent? And how do you get everyone kind of on the same page when they're not necessarily spending time on a computer with all these communication platforms?
I love it. No, that's an awesome example. We've done a ton of work in manufacturing, and whether it's like service techs or I'll give you an example. There's a company called General Sheet Metal that we work with. They have a ton of welders in the field. They have some office staff, so it's kind of like a hybrid environment. And they don't have access to too many tools. Staff does have access to email, but what they do is they do have a regular email newsletter that goes out where they recognize staff for good work. They've also empowered managers to recognize staff. They're using our platform in this case, which makes it really easy to recognize people on mobile devices. So in their case, they have people in the field, they have people in different cities, and it's just really easy for a manager to hand out a safety award or a customer satisfaction award. Yeah, in summary, there are some really great tools out there, whether it's us or somebody else. I'm impartial. Well, sure, I am very partial in that case, but there's lots of options out there that you can choose from that make it super easy to recognize remote staff. The key takeaway there is you want your program to be super mobile friendly so that people can be recognized on mobile devices or whatever their preferred communication choice is.
Yeah, I've also heard of tablets kind of up on podiums too, or at payment centers and stuff like that to have that run as well. Question here, a couple questions going on about the points systems. So how do you view points used for recognition versus cash? And how does that system work?
So in our specific case, we set it up to work however you want it to work. So 1 point can be equal to whatever you want it to be. Like 1 point could be equal to $1, 1 point could be equal to 10 cents. So you're able to set up a program that serves your needs. From my experience, I do like to differentiate between the two, between cash and points. Just because, again, thinking all the way back to that, the Google example, you don't necessarily want this to have attached, you don't want the recognition to be attached to traditional compensation. And if you use points, the points are, say, 10 cents. If each point's 10 cents, it very, very quickly disassociates points from a cash value.
That's great to hear. So to another question here is, how can you measure participation over a very, very large company? So we've been talking about field employees and that kind of idea, but from a really big company throughout North America, how would you measure that?
I love it. So awesome question. What's really cool about this is I look at it in aggregate. So what's your total program participation rate? If you have different geographical offices or different teams, I drill down to the team level. So what's participation rate by different teams? I'd also be really curious about like how the recognition is happening inside these different teams. So for example, with developers, say in a tech company, what I've seen is that they love being able to recognize one another if they can do it through Slack or through MS Teams, because those are some of their favorite tools. In the absence of those tools, recognition tends to go down because a developer, like a programmer, is less likely to get up in a Zoom meeting and acknowledge a peer, because again, from my experience, sometimes they're not the most vocal people. But in summary, look at the total participation, break it up by geography to understand how the different offices are doing, drill down by team, and ideally you'll start seeing correlations. Like, for example, if a leader or a business unit manager is great at recognition, normally a ton of recognition will be taking place inside of that business unit. So no surprises, the team will tend to follow where the leader is going. But those are some quick tips on how I would divvy that up and break it up.
That's a great point, Jason. Yeah, thanks. That's very important numbers and reports to go back and check. So a lot of questions here about bucket list as well. Do you want to just let them know where you can learn more information for some of those platforms?
Yeah, I mean, in summary, if you guys want to learn more about us, feel free to ask, Jared or myself, or there's a huge number of employees you could contact. The best place would be probably, I'll pull it up on screen, bucketlistrewards.com. We have a lovely team. We do an amazing job taking care of our employees, and yeah, just come here and go to our contact page if you want to get directly in contact with us, or you can browse this for more information. Awesome. And I think with that, how are we doing here, Jared?
Yeah, no, I mean, those have been some great questions. Like we answered most of them. Laceland, we do Slack, Teams, Outlook, all that kind of stuff too. Integration with bucket list.
Yeah, so great question, 100%. Yeah, we have a fully integrated two-way integration with Slack and MS Teams, so you can recognize from our platform or from inside of Slack. We have integrations with Slack, MS Teams, Gmail, Outlook, something that's near and dear to our heart is if we can make our platform super easy for your employees to use, they're going to love it. And so we've made our platform insanely easy to use and to access. So yeah, we have a very large number of integrations.